Ah, ecco, sì. Mi sentite? Buonasera. Avete passato una bella giornata? Immagino di sì. E anch'io sono molto felice di essere qua. E stasera parliamo di ritmi della vita, di come il tempo scandisce la nostra
Tonight
vita
we will talk
e di
about
come
how
noi, consapevolmente o non
time,
consapevolmente, possiamo condizionare il funzionamento di quelli che si chiamano
how we, in a
bioritmi.
way that is aware or not, we can condition our own so-called
Il tema l'ho
biorhythms.
scelto
I chose the theme
diciamo, per
on the basis
inserirmi
to
nel tema che Lama Michel ha scelto
get into the theme that
per questa
Lama
edizione di
Michel
Dharma
chose for this
nell'attesa, che è il silenzio
edition of
dei
Dharma in
sensi.
Silence, which is the silence of the
Se
senses.
non c'è
If
silenzio, cioè se
there
non ci
is no
sono
silence,
pause,
so if
non
there
ci
are
può
no
essere
pauses, then there
sincronizzazione
cannot
di
be
nessuna funzione.
synchronization of any
Quindi
function.
cercherò di
And so I
accompagnarvi
will try
in un
to
percorso
accompany
che è
you
un po' di
along a
dati
way that
fisici,
is
anatomici,
a bit with
fisiologici,
scientific data and
ma anche
physiological
un
data,
pochino
but
oltre
also
per
a
capire
bit further than
come
that
non
to understand
ostacolare
how
ciò che
to
la
not
natura
obstacle
ha
what
creato già in un
nature
modo
already
non
created in a
perfetto
way
di
that is
lui,
not perfect, but
perché ci
even
ha
more
dato
than
tutta una
perfect,
serie di
because it gave us
sistemi
a whole series of systems
davvero che
that
penso
really
nessuno avrebbe potuto
no
immaginare
one could
in questa
have studied
perfezione, ma
with
spesso
this
noi
perfection, but
eh,
often
cerchiamo
we
di
try to
forzarli,
force them.
si userebbe un
We
termine
would
che è
use a term that
hackerarli,
is
cioè
to hack
modificarli,
them, so to
ripiegarli
change them,
alle
to bend them
nostre
to our will, to
esigenze,
our
che a
needs,
volte chiamiamo
which
necessità. A
sometimes we
volte
call
lo sono
needs.
veramente,
Sometimes they
altre
are
volte è
really needs,
semplicemente
other
che ci
times
è più
simply that it's more
comodo
convenient
così.
for us in a certain
E
way.
quindi io spero
And
di
so I hope
riuscire a spiegarvi
to be
una
able to
cosa che in
explain
realtà sarebbe molto complessa, ma
something that
vedrò di
actually it
renderla
could be quite
così
complex, but I will try
fruibile
to make
anche
it
da chi
very
non ha
accessible also
questi,
by
diciamo,
those that
grandissime basi,
don't have a lot of
per capire meglio come
basis
funzioniamo.
to understand better how we work.
La nostra vita quindi è scandita da questi tempi. Chi si
So our life
occupa
is
di
managed by these different times.
e
Who
di gestire. Noi abbiamo un
manages
sistema
them?
internamente che si chiama proprio il sistema degli interocettori,
What manages them is our
che
system of the
istante per istante rivede
interoceptors
da
that
ogni
moment by
nostro
moment
organo, cellula o tessuto
receives
il
from any
funzionamento,
organ,
lo
cell,
stato,
tissue, the functioning, the
il livello
state,
di attività,
and the level of
ma
activity.
non
But
solo
not
dal
only
sistema
from
interno,
the
quindi non solo
inner
dall'ambiente
system,
interno, ma
also
anche
not only from
dall'ambiente
the inner
esterno.
environment, but also from the outer
Quindi il
environment.
principale
And so the
notte e
main,
giorno,
mainly
lumino e
like a
luce,
day and night,
condizionano
light or darkness,
moltissimo
condition a lot
ciò che avviene
what
all'interno del nostro
happens inside
corpo.
of our body.
Quindi dormire di
So to
giorno è
sleep
come
during the
dormire
day,
di
is it
notte,
the
vi dà lo
same as
stesso beneficio e
sleeping by
riposo.
night?
Penso che tutti abbiano
Does it give it the same
sperimentato
benefit
che
and
no, non
rest?
è così.
I think that
E
everyone has
mangiare di
experienced that it's
notte
not.
è
And also that
un po'
to
la stessa
eat
cosa.
by night is a bit the same thing.
Il fatto
The fact
che venga
the
fatto
fact that we do it
perché
because
con l'avvento della luce elettrica tutto è
with
diventato possibile,
electric light
non
everything is
significa che
possible
sia
doesn't mean
esattamente
that it's
una cosa
exactly
sana.
a unhealthy thing.
Chi si occupa di
Who
gestire tutto questo
takes
sistema,
care
soprattutto a
of
livello
this
di
whole
quelle
system,
regolazioni che
especially
sono
about all those
assolutamente
regulations
inconsce,
that
cioè
are absolutely
indipendenti dalla nostra
unconscious, so
volontà
independent
o da
from our
quello che
will
noi
or
possiamo volere o
from
non
what we
volere.
want or don't want.
Una parte del sistema
A part of
nervoso
the
che viene
nervous system
definito
which is defined
autonomo proprio
autonomous,
perché agisce
just because
assolutamente
indeed it
per conto
acts
suo,
by
tant'è che
on its
durante il
own,
sonno in
and
cui la
during
nostra
sleep,
coscienza
where
non
when
c'è,
our
è
consciousness is
spenta,
not there, is
noi
switched
continuiamo
off,
a
we keep on
respirare, il cuore
breathing,
batte, tutto
the heart
funziona, anzi certi
pulses,
organi come il
and
fegato
actually some
funzionano di
organs,
più
like such
durante
as the
la
liver,
notte
work
piuttosto
more
che
during the
durante
night
il
rather than
giorno.
during the day.
Vedete, ci sono a
You
modo di
see that,
esempio le
as an
connessioni del
example,
sistema
there are
nervoso
some
autonomo con i
connections of the
principali organi
autonomous
rappresentati, ma in
nervous
realtà
system with the main organs that are
questo tipo
represented
di
here, but
comando
actually
arriva
this type of command
fino alle più piccole
gets
cellule.
also to the tiniest cells. how does the autonomous nervous system articulate in the sympathetic system and parasympathetic, also called vagal. Words that everyone uses with a lot of familiarity, but I believe that, I don't know, how did you represent it in your imagination? The autonomous nervous system or the vagal? I have the vagal that is inflamed, the osteopatha. How do you imagine it? Maybe I will try to give you a definition that goes beyond words, images. The sympathetic system comes from the brain that at its basis, so let's say going down at the neck, gets thinner and then it transforms into the spinal medulla, and from each vertebra there are two branches coming out that you see in the image on the left, that then reach all the various organs. And there we don't have only the branches of the sympathetic, but also of the for moving the muscles and all of that. But now we focus on the autonomic component, so things that work independently from our will. So you see that they get until the bottom, and for example at the level of the last vertebra there are some nerves coming, and they spread through the intestines, the bladder, the kidneys. They regulate the blood pressure, and this is the sympathetic system. The parasympathetic system it's a couple of it's a pair of verses that run aside of the neck, and they're like there are many of these nerves, small nerves together, like sort of bundles of nerves. And for example, it has the effect of making the heartbeat slower, the heart rate slower. And this is one of the functions of the parasympathetic. So why to not touch violently these areas of the neck? Because there could be like a slowing down, also an extreme one. Now we need to do it in a quite strong way of the heart rate. And then these sort of beans, bundles, go through the diaphragm, through the same hole where the esophagus also goes, and in the abdomen they branch out to all the abdominal organs and then also to the pelvic area and the organs there. The two systems have actions that are exactly opposite. The sympathetic nervous system is activating, stimulates activity. The vagal system has the function to inhibit, and so to slow down also for example the heartbeat or the breathing. And looking at the digestion, that thing is a bit different, and we will look at it afterwards. What is really important is that the two systems alternate in an harmonious way, and that is why we call it the dance of the hours, because it follows the time, the rhythm of the hours, but it's really like a dance where each one of the two dancers needs to play its role without stepping on each other's feet. We could compare it to a swing, and it's really like that. When the sympathetic system is high, that is very activated, it's impossible for the vagal to be also activated, and also the other way around is true.
Quindi ad acico l'attività. È evidente che non
and it's evident that there is never a complete switching off, neither of one or the other, because there would be excessive. A complete switch off of the sympathetic with absolute prevalence of the vagal, then from the point of view of the heartbeat, then it would be like just a complete stop, like a stroke. And so according to the necessity of the moment, one prevails over the other.
Quindi, Per dormire che cosa ci servirà?
And so to sleep, in order to sleep, what do we need? We need the vagal, the parasympathetic, which is activated. So the sympathetic needs to be put aside. We need the parasympathetic to be high. If the sympathetic is too active, then we will not be able to rest in a satisfactory way. Maybe we'll have a hard time to calm down. Maybe, like one of those evenings that after a hard day at work, then you keep on thinking about the things of work, and you will like to open up the laptop 1 second because that thing comes to your mind. And that's a sympathetic system that it's lasting longer than it should. We should be able to switch on or off according to what we need to do.
Invece durante il giorno o in una situazione di
On the other hand, during the day or in a situation of danger, because then also when our systems develop the situations of dangers or running away from preys and to escape from big dangers and to find food, now we have transformed them into managing to be able to do our job well, to not be fired, to have at the end of our month an income that allows us to survive and to not be excluded by our the social group to which we belong. And the autonomous response is the same. And so the situations of danger, like okay, tomorrow I have a meeting and I didn't prepare myself enough, or I was called by my boss. What is he going to tell me? So we read these situations just exactly as dangerous as when our ancestors were going to face a lion, for example. But the lion was something that was resolved in a short time. So either the lion will eat us and then end of the alarm. Otherwise, the lion could just also go away, and so also at the end of the alarm. There was no continuously going back to the alarming situations, just as we do. And now we have like one alarm after the other because we have many tasks, and often the amount, the sum of everything is such that the parasympathetic doesn't get activated, and so we cannot rest well. So we say that both we have a sympathetic and a vagal system that alternate each other, but do they do in the same niche, in the same level? No. There are some persons that are more broad to have a vagal system or more on the sympathetic system. Like the sympathetic are those that are more active, that have always like the head moving, they're doing one thing and they're really thinking about the next one, and they fall asleep because they're exhausted. And these are what are called the sympathetic tonic people. And then there are those that have prevailing vagal system, that have a harder time to put themselves in activity, and that anyway tend to have slower rhythms and that sleep better. Maybe they have a harder time to wake up. And what are the pros of a life that is productive, like in the right amount, but also relaxed and free from sicknesses? The balance between the two systems. So here you see where the parasympathetic and the sympathetic cross, that is the perfect center. Some they have it a bit more shifted towards the vagal, others towards the sympathetic. A vagal system that is more tonic allows to our activation to step backward a bit without collapsing. On the other hand, whereas sympathetic was very active, then you work, but then there is a collapse also, either in the short term or in the long term. So then I will tell you a trick to understand if you are more towards one group or towards the other. We all are. So the parasympathetic is the function of it is to rest, but also to be able to digest. All the activities of digestion depend on a on a vagal activity, on a good vagal tone, what the Americans define rest and digest. In order to rest and to digest, we need a vagal activity, so that the sympathetic, the thoughts, the activities, the anxieties are calmed down in order to be able to make the other system raise. And so the sympathetic is about the we are here because our ancestors, activating the fight or flight mode, were able to survive and to reproduce themselves and get to here. So also the sympathetic activity is absolutely not something that is not right, but it should be alternated with the other component. As I'm looking at Bell, there will be another distinction of the vagal that is between dorsal vagal and ventral vagal, which I didn't introduce because it will complicate excessively. So one related to the back, the other related to the abdomen. Because also here there is an important difference, an important mechanism of health and survival. So flexibility, autonomous flexibility is what allows us to live well and in health, and also happier, because if we are without excessive anxieties, but also we don't constantly feel undertone like a person that is hypervagal, then we can work better. So these rhythms depend on what we do, on what we have to do also, but they also depend by the time of the day, and that is not something that we decide. These are decided by the turning of the sun. Okay, we are turning, I know, but we say that the sun turns 24 hours, and there is a very strong synchronization of what happens outside, not just light and darkness, but a lot more, with the functioning of our organs. Now I wanted to make you do a little exercise of imagination. Think about something that you do commonly in your life that is pleasant or very pleasant or normal, it doesn't matter. Think about yourself doing that thing. Really see yourself in the environment, in the situation. Feel what you are feeling in that case.
Immagino che avrete scelto qualcosa di semplice, quindi adesso ci siete. Adesso pensate che questa azione,
now think that this action, this task, continues
per un tempo lungo,
for a very, very long time. Not that, I don't know if you thought that you're working and maybe you also like your job, but then anyway at a certain time it ends and you go home and you do something else. No, it just continues. Continues, goes on, and then maybe it will stop, but you don't know when. You don't know why, because someone interrupts you, because someone gives you another task to do. How would you feel in such a situation? Also, maybe even if you imagine like a very beautiful situation, who could like something like that?
Io credo a nessuno.
If you don't say it, I believe to no one. Even if you thought about the most beautiful thing for you. Every time that we force our biorhythms, we impose on our physiological functions, on our organs, a situation like that I made you imagine. So, for example, a stomach that is continuously full of food and needs to digest and digest and digest.
cuore, non so, magari
a heart. I don't know, maybe someone thought about running. I really like to run. And not only the muscles get tired, but also the heart that is pumping at 140, 160. Then it will have a little some problems, definitely. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of our organs, which actually are our own shoes. It's not like something that belongs to someone else. And let's think about the situation where we just force them to a continuous task, and this is something that we do. Clearly, it's not that that we work for 3 days with no stop, but maybe we pushed much further from the normal way of functioning. So, like me, for example, our body has a very great capacity of adaptation, but we cannot say that it does it without some biological costs that can also be quite expensive. And so, to grant to our circadian rhythms, so circadian means that it goes through the day, through the hours of the day. We have the various rhythms of the seasons, daily rhythms, and so let's allow our organs to work in sync with what it should be, and this brings to granting ourselves a possibility of health that is much greater, rather than forcing ourselves to do things that shouldn't be done at a certain time or in that moment, in a certain moment. We have said that the nervous system gives the laws and the orders, and how are they passed to the various organs? Definitely through the nervous branches, but we have more subtle adaptations, and so there is also the participation from the hormones, so the endocrine system, the endocrine glands, and the main ones. Now briefly we will go through them, and they are the messengers that send orders of functioning, but also that regulate the volume, because our organs is not that they're always on or off, but they can work at full intensity, or like 70% or 50% or 30%. And so they also decide the switching on and off of a system, but also they decide how intensively a certain system is working. Now, I don't want to bore you, but also here we should say something, because about endocrine glands, okay, what does it mean? Gland is something that produces substances, hormones, that act not directly, so in proximity, not in the proximity of the gland, but to a distance. So they go through the body, they circulate through the body, and where there are sensible receptors to them, they get hooked, and so they act as interrupters, switching on and off. Like, for example, let's give an example of an endocrine gland, like thyroid. Thyroid produces two hormones, more or less, that have an activity of regulation on heart rate, metabolism, sleep and wake, on the pancreas, on
sugli organi sessuali
sexual organs, both on females and males. So a lot of regulation that depends on thyroid, but does it act by its own initiative? No, it acts on the basis of the orders given by the pituitary gland, which regulates all the endocrine glands, which receives orders from the hypothalamus, so which is in the brain.
Dei messaggeri, e i messaggeri sono le ghiandole attraverso la produzione di ormoni, regola i livelli di glucosio nel sangue.
And so these hormones are able to regulate, for example, the level of sugar in the blood
attraverso un ormone che si chiama insulina.
Through a hormone that is called insulin. If we don't have sugar run because we have been fasting lately and we need a lot for to do anything, then it gets it through gets it from the opposite hormone, which is called the glucagon. We talk about a lot about insulin and very little about the glucagon, but they are equally important. There is another gland above all, which is very small, which is the epiphysis, also called pineal gland, just slightly above the pituitary gland, which is actually the great director, and it's the one that is the most sensible to external variations. So, for example, light and darkness activate or deactivate the epiphysis, which, on its turn, through other hormones, is able to regulate, for example, the rhythm of sleep and waking up, and all the functions that are related to these systems.
Cosa succede in una
Let's look at what happens during a day phase.
Qui abbiamo, pensavo di averne messe 2 in realtà. Abbiamo in rosso,
so in red we have cortisol, and in blue we have melatonin. So cortisol is more related to the sympathetic, and it's activating the melatonin. We didn't take it like once in life in order to sleep. And so melatonin is that which makes us fall asleep, but not only that. So during the day we will need to have more cortisol and to have melatonin on the side, and then by night we will need mostly melatonin, but only if cortisol decreases. You see the two little men, one during the night has a lot of blue and so a lot of melatonin and little cortisol, and during the day the opposite. So the so-called day window sees a profile of this kind. So you see cortisol increasing, so you see that it's high, then we will also see later when it's at the peak, and there is also a relation to body temperature. While in the night window, melatonin increases and the body temperature decreases. You all know that the temperature around 6 or 7 in the evening, is it the highest, higher or lower than in the morning? It's higher. It's higher in the evening and lower in the morning.
Pensate che nei monitoraggi della qualità del sonno,
that in the monitorings of the quality of sleep that are done when there is some
quando la temperatura durante la notte
exam on that, then it's based also on this. So during the night, okay, if in the night the temperature increases by 0.1, the quality of sleep changes a lot. Now, a lot of importance is given to this. Like when we wake up in the night and we are sweating, that's because there has been a level of melatonin that is insufficient to sustain a resting sleep. And these are things that we should note.
E vediamo un attimo cortisolo.
And so let's also look at cortisol, which is also a word that is very, very much used. Cortisol is all it's all fault of the cortisol and this and that. But without cortisol, actually, we wouldn't survive. This is the daily curve of the cortisol, the dashed one. The dashed one will be the normal one. So the peak of cortisol is in the morning. In the morning because that's the hormone that activates us and that was always pushing our ancestors out of the cave because they didn't have the biscuits, they didn't have the fridge for the glass of milk and so on, and so they needed to go out to be able to get some food to survive before the sunset. And so nature scheduled this wonderful system that is, okay, peak of cortisol, then if you had some pains, then you feel them less, you need sugars because like you haven't been eating since yesterday, and so like the cortisol that we get from outside, it increases glycemia because the muscles need sugar, so it would set the whole system, it would set it up so that then it could go hunting, it could search for survival and so on. And once it is activated, let's say in good conditions, then there is no need to maintain it. Then we will also see what kind of conditions create some peaks on demand. So for example, if there is the need, cortisol increases, like if I'm in front of a lion, then the cortisol will peak, but there is no need that it maintains such a level for the whole day. And this is the graph on 5 tests. That is
sono dei kit.
Okay, if you want to check how your cortisol is doing, there are some kits that you can buy, and you put it under the tongue. There is like a little stick that you put under the tongue. So when you wake up after 30 minutes, after 60 minutes, then at 6 in the evening, and then I think at 22. And if you have a profile that looks more or less like this, so like a peak 30 minutes after the waking up and then a gradual descent, then you're doing fine. What could happen when we abuse of cortisol? This, for example, is the curve where there is a physiological response which is drawn actually quite badly, and where the red line marks the dosage of cortisol with people that have autoimmune pathologies like thyroiditis of Hashimoto. So in the persons that are sick of autoimmune sicknesses, you see that the curve of the cortisol is very much different. They don't have the peak in the morning, but this freeing, this descent that usually happens after 12, it remains slow and goes also straight inside of the melatonin area, because you see that it goes way beyond the 6 in the evening. This is typical, for example, of those that sleep badly because maybe of high cortisol, which didn't allow melatonin to be released, and so in the morning it's not rest, wakes up tired, and typically they tell you no, in the morning it's not fine at all, but after then, I get to evening where that I will never go to sleep. And so this is exactly like an unbalanced curve of cortisol, and this is just a result. We're not saying why does it have this imbalance. There are many reasons, but there is an imbalance. And so to test the curve of cortisol on these 5 tests, I see that many people do the exams and do just the one in the morning, which doesn't tell us a lot because we need to define a curve. And so actually, let's also see what happens very often. What is the physiological stress that we have said that it's natural, normal, and serves to survival? What are the responses to to stress, to alarms that are too often repeated during the day? So look at the curve. At the first alarm, then there is a switch off. And then the switch off is not so complete anymore. You see that the line is not going back to the baseline. And if even further stimulation gets some to that, then there is an increase, because it never goes back to the total switch off. And until a certain level, that is the superior horizontal line, we are in that situation that technically is called of allostasis. I know that I am beyond my own normal mechanisms of balance, but I can do it, I can manage it. It's as if we were trying to stand on an horizontal plane and there is no problem, but then bit by bit they tilt the floor. Then up to a certain point we're able to balance ourselves and to keep on standing, but then the tilting becomes such that that is when we cross that horizontal line on top, that from one moment to the other we could fall. And so our system, in this case, has gone in a state that is called of cacostasis, that is a state that is kakos, which means ugly, bad.
Quindi molte persone, forse
And so many people, maybe also me,
molte persone vivono o
live
viviamo in
or
uno stato
we live in a state that is between the middle of the middle area, the middle lower area, and that is very close to the upper line. And if this happens for short times, then it can be compensated. But if this thing goes on and on for months and years, then it means that in our body is running such a high level of cortisol that who of you will take
un po' di cortisone tutti i giorni.
a bit of cortisol every day, cortisone,
Eppure il cortisolo
just for the sake of it, but the cortisol that we take every day has exactly the same effect. For example, the resistance to insulin, the fact that glycemia tends to increase is directly proportionated to the levels of cortisol that we produce, and that are flowing. Cortisol is a hormone that is very effective in the short term, mid-term, but that in the long run is really something that is harmful.
Riassumendo,
so, summing it up, sympathetic and parasympathetic have one an effect of excitation, activation, the other one of slowing down. They always need to be balanced, and one needs to give room to the other.
abbiamo detto che c'è una
We've said that there is a strict correlation between our circadian rhythms, so the 24 hours, and the functioning of the inner organs. Now, since I'm a gastroenterologist and sometimes I also like to remember it, I would like to explain you what happens to the digestive apparatus if we respect these times, or if we eat whenever you want, when it's convenient, or when we can, or when we want. Each one then will make his choice whether that meal that was done too late whether it was really necessary. Yeah, but with friends, okay, you go out to dinner in the evening. It's not that we can meet at 6:30 because the restaurant is not even open. So we meet at 8:30, then we eat something, and then we start dinner at like 9:30. So is it really necessary, or maybe could we try to change it? So let's look at how capacity of digesting, of really processing what we put in the stomach works from dawn to the sunset. We've already said that during the night, how many meals should we have? 0. Then we will define night also. When does night start? At 7 in the evening. I know that this is not good news, but it's like that. This I would have kept it for later. In the morning, the capacity of digesting is quite low because the vagal is still quite dominant, until there is that peak of cortisol that we have said that it's 30 minutes after waking up, and then so it would be better to not eat. And so here also those that wake up and eat right away, it's a sign of an imbalance. And so in the morning the capacity of digesting is low, but it's improving, it's increasing, just as the sun is rising, and it's at its peak when the sun is at the zenith, so from 11 until 2 in the afternoon. And then it goes down, not very slowly, and then at 7 it's really dark. Okay, in winter maybe also already at 5. And so we have already understood about the quantity. What should we eat in the morning? Okay, not much, but the capacity of digesting is increasing because we eat, and then we need like 1 hour and a half to digest, and in meanwhile the capacity of digesting has increased. The main meal should be placed at noon, while in the evening you see that there are the 3 bowls that get smaller and smaller, because if we eat quite early in the evening, then we can have bigger portions, and the later we do it, the less we should fill our stomach, because with the falling of the sun, the movements of the stomach and also with sleeping, they almost stop. So we can't put our stomach in the condition of staying full for such a long time of food that then does remain there, and then we will also see what destiny they have. And so what and when eating was come sometimes to me for a visit, as already knows all of this. I know there are many of you that know that at breakfast you should eat, possibly in the following order: proteins or fibers, some healthy fats, and some carbohydrates. Why in this order? Because the carbohydrates by themselves, in a moment where we already have high cortisol, would lead us to a hyperglycemic state, and they would increase the possibilities of developing diabetes. And so carbohydrates, yes, but after proteins or fibers, and the fats that have the function of slowing down the digestion and the circulation of the carbohydrates. So we need the carbohydrates, but it shouldn't be the typical the Italian breakfast with a lot of sweets. And also when we have the cappuccino and the brioche that is transformed into cereals and vegetable milk, it's still just carbohydrates. Yes, the quality changed, but the biochemical dynamic didn't change. So to put on some proteins is really serves this. And so the sooner we start doing it in life, the longer then our sensitivity to insulin will last. So the less the possibility to develop diabetes. Bread and marmalade and jam at breakfast is terrible. I know it's pleasant, but it's terrible. So, but if you put on the bread, that it should also always be toasted for another series of reasons, and you put on the butter, like clarified butter, or coconut butter, or some other healthy fat, then you have already slowed down the circulation of these carbohydrates, and so then already the glycemic peaks are lower. The release is slower, and the glycemic peak is lower. So we shouldn't twist breakfast upside down, but just to learn how to modulate it. At the same time, for example, it's fine like almonds cream or of nuts, like 100%. I'm talking about the one 100%, not the one mixed with sugars. And so there are some possibilities, but I believe that especially for those that then have lunch in a way that is rushed or not complete for reasons of work, then it's better to eat at breakfast a certain amount of proteins that are metabolized well, digested well, because it takes there is a lot of time at disposal. And then we have stored away a portion of the proteins that will be transformed into amino acids and that we will need throughout the day. Now, just to give you a capacity to make your own choices. Times of digestion of the foods. Okay, you can look at the difference between a cereal or some fruit and cheese, for example.
Ci sono molte persone.
There are many people. I live in Emilia. I was born in Novara, but I live in Emilia, where with no ham and with no parmesan you cannot live. And really they die of a tremendous death.
Voi convincete
And you try to convince people that to eat ham or also other things that are maybe more consistent thing, and cheese in the evening, that is not a light dinner. This is in the collective imagination, and it was coded like that, and so. But if people are able to go through a week of test in a different way, I had a client which didn't have any problems of health, actually was an athlete, and he told me that he was sleeping well, and when he came back to check, he told me, yes, I thought I was sleeping well, but after changing my dinner, then I understood what does it mean to sleep well. And so think how this, the fact of eating well influences the quality of sleep. And here we have a bit of a summary of what are the times, the ideal times for the functioning of the various organs and apparatus.
Sto pensando che ho saltato una slide.
I think I skipped
Perché
a
qui c'è
slide, because here we have breakfast. But
sì. Quindi, cosa succede
so, what happens if we eat the wrong thing at the wrong time? If we have a meal that is very easy to digest, the typical, what we typically eat at lunch, an Italian, typical Italian, yes, a plate of a dish of pasta. So what are the effects of a dish of pasta at lunch? Even if there are some vegetables, which is already there is already some attention there to a more refined eating. Okay, as a minimum, it happens that you get sleepy after lunch because carbohydrates give that sleeping sense. They bind to some receptors in the brain, which are called similopiaceus, and they make us sleep. And so the gluten and the milk have this activity, which is not wrong. Simply, often is not desired in the middle of the day when maybe you have already been back to work, to the office, and you should work.
Facilissima
So, very easy digestion, sleepiness. They are anyway a source of glucose, to which there will be a peak of insulin, which will then decrease the glucose, making you feel hungry like 2 or 3 hours later. So maybe you can resist without taking a snack in the afternoon. And the same also is true for the sweet breakfast. Many people need to have a snack in the middle of the morning because they just put sugars there, so they have a peak of glycemia, and then they need to eat because, yeah, doctor, otherwise I cannot put one idea after the other. That's true, because with a glycemic peak you cannot reason well, and so that's why we shouldn't base our breakfast just on carbohydrates. If we do it at lunch, it's also the same thing. So if we can resist for a second snack, which definitely for adults is too much, for adults 2 meals should be right. We don't need to eat so often. And we get home around 5:30, 6, which is still not dining time for our standards, and you just eat whatever comes in front of you. You open the fridge, and after that, but then it's not really a proper dinner. And so then follows also 1 hour and a half or 2 later the proper dinner, where do we accumulate the greatest amount of food in the moment where our digestive system, and remember also the sun, is falling down. So what does it happen to this food, both the food of the snack and the one of the dinner that is not digested properly, it remains in the stomach for an excessive amount of time. And then, eventually, also very slowly, the stomach is able to empty itself, and all this thing that is not well digested, because it's about the quality of digestion, it's not just the time, goes through to the intestine, where in the intestine there is the microbiota, a vast population of around 1500 species that is very well adapted to any condition. So if we got them used to receiving well-digested food, they will be happy with that, then they will increase the population that
E questa si chiama eubiosi.
Healthy, and this is called eubiosis. But if regularly there is food there that is badly digested, then something takes care of it. It's not wasted. Nothing is wasted. But then the population of those that make it and populations that take care of the food that is badly digested. And this is also something that happens in our society. So if there is more availability of a certain aspect, a certain resource increases like a certain kind of population. So the increase of these types of bacteria, which
ci vuole neanche così tanto tempo,
which take care of putrefaction also, this creates some inflammation of the barrier, because they don't produce the right substances. For example, they don't create amino acids of the right type, which act as fuel for enterocytes. See the gray cells there, so these poor enterocytes, which are not very well nourished, then they will also reproduce in a worse way, and bit by bit the barrier of the intestine becomes less compact, and there will be this sort of holes that you see there at the center. There's a sort of passage of things that can be that go from the intestine to the blood, and the situation that is called intestine permeability, that is much more frequent than it seems, allows the passage into the blood of substances, but also bacteria, of things that should stay inside of the intestine, but actually goes in the blood. Once that it's in the blood, it gets everywhere. And so we also understand here our bad digestion causes dysbiosis, and if lasts, then it becomes also, it brings to an intestine permeability, which brings to many diseases that also we won't maybe relate to that. Also, for example, thyroid, because a very common issue is that there is a correlation between the intestine permeability and intolerance to gluten that is not celiac, and other intolerances, and also streptococcus in the middle, and I don't explain you why, because it's very complex, but and also the self-immunity, so antibodies that attack the thyroid itself. I know it seems like a bit of fantasy passages, but actually this is all very well documented. And so you can understand how a meal that is wrong because it's in the wrong moment, not because absolutely by absolute is wrong, can give clearly not just one meal and then tomorrow I have a problem, but a habit of this kind can give problems also at distance and also quite serious. So I quote, just for quoting, all the problems related to histamine that in the intestine is present but should remain there and play its role there. But if it goes circulating in high amounts, it gives all those problems that partly we know from dermatitis, urticaria, the swelling of our lips, until the more serious reactions like breathing shocks and asthma.
Quindi, rispettare
So,
le ore del giorno
to respect the hours of the day
per avere
in order
una
to have
possibilità
the
di
possibility
vita
of
sana e di
healthy
grande energia
life
fisica,
and
perché io
with
credo che il
great
primo
physical energy, because I believe that the
indicatore
first
che noi possiamo
marker
avere
that
del fatto che stiamo
we can have
vivendo
of the
in
fact that we are
modo
living in a way that
sano
it's healthy
sia il livello
is
di
the
energia.
level of energy.
Qui non so perché
Here,
cosa
I don't
mangiare negli
know.
altri due pasti, perché vi ho fatto tutta una premessa.
Okay, I made you a whole premise now,
Allora,
and now we talk
a
about
pranzo si mangiano
what
le
what
proteine,
we
vi
should eat
ricordate quali
in the
erano
order
gli
two meals.
alimenti più lunghi da
Okay, you
digerire?
remember which
Formaggio,
ones
carne.
were the
Bisognerebbe farne un
longest
uso veramente
types of food to
limitato,
digest, the ham and cheese
proteine
and
a
so on?
pranzo
We should
e
make a
carbonati a
limited use of
cena,
them. And so
sempre
proteins
molto
at lunch
scure.
and carbohydrates at dinner, always with
Mi
vegetables.
soffermo un attimo sulla
I
cena,
stop for a moment on dinner,
che è molto discussa.
which is very
Quasi
much
sempre quando
discussed
io dico
about.
questa cosa mi dicono:
Very
ma
often
come?
when I talk about
Carboidrati
this,
a
then
cena,
people
gli
tell me,
zuccheri a
what do you
cena
mean, like
dovrebbero essere
carbohydrates at dinner,
vietati.
sugars at
Sì,
dinner
c'è
should be
differenza
abolished?
tra
Yes,
gli
but there is a
zuccheri e i
difference between
cereali.
sugars
Quindi
and
a cena si
cereals.
possono
So at
mangiare
dinner we could
verdure
eat
sempre. Vedete
always
che
vegetables,
sono
always. You see
presenti
that they are
sia a
present
pranzo
both at
sempre
lunch,
sia a
always,
cena.
and then
A
also at
cena è
dinner.
meglio mangiare
At dinner
verdure
is better to
cotte.
eat
In
cooked
realtà chi ha
vegetables. Actually,
problemi di
those that have problems
digestione
of
o di
digestion
intestino
or
dovrebbe
the
sempre
intestine,
mangiare
they
verdure
should
cotte. La
always
verdura
eat
cruda
cooked
non è
vegetables.
così facile da digerire.
Raw
Spesso non
vegetables
abbiamo
are
sughi
not so easy to
gastrici
digest. Often we
sufficientemente
don't have
validi. La cottura
strong
non è
enough
sempre una cosa, la
digestive
bollitura, una roba
acids.
molle, ma può essere anche
To cook a
cioè
vegetable
carne
doesn't have to
padella,
be like
però
that they are like
bisogna
super
dare,
soft, but it can
è
also be
come
just
una mezza
passed
digestione,
quickly in the
il
pan.
passaggio al
So
calore
it's
fa
the
già
passing
una
it
mezza
on
digestione,
the
quindi
heat
diventa molto più
then
facile il
acts
compito
like
della
as a sort of
cena.
half digestion.
Ortaggi e cereali integrali, ottima
So then we
cena.
have vegetables and
Ortaggi
cereal,
importanti,
whole
sono sempre una
cereals.
buona
That's
fonte di
wonderful dinner.
carboidrati, però
Vegetables and
modulati
potatoes
dalle fibre degli ortaggi
they are
diventano un
still
problema.
carbohydrates, but
Ortaggi e pane,
modulated by vegetables,
un'altra
then
fonte
they're
di
not a problem.
carboidrato, il pane andrebbe
Also,
sempre
vegetables are
tostato
bread. Bread should always be
perché
toasted because
diminuisce la
it
quota dei
decreases the
lieviti
amount
vivi,
of
perché anche nel pane cotto in forno ci sono ancora molti
yeast
lieviti vivi
that is
che a
alive,
livello
because also in
intestinale
the
continuano a vivere e vanno a
and they that
rinforzare ad
keep on
esempio il
living in the
chiodo di
intestine,
Candide.
and that
E poi
also
un po' di
make
frutta cotta.
candida populations stronger.
Le zuppe sono una
And plus
soluzione
that also
ottimale, non
cooked
metteteci la
fruit.
frutta però, eh. Le zuppe sono la soluzione
Soups are the
ottimale
ideal
per
solution
questo connubio.
for this
Quindi
mix.
la zuppa dovrebbe
So the
essere non
soup
troppo
should
liquida
be not too liquid
e non troppo
and not too
densa,
dense.
come sempre
As
una
always,
via di
a
mezzo
way in
è
between, middle
perfetta.
way is perfect.
È bene cambiare
It's good to
sempre
change
la
the
composizione.
composition.
Vi ho detto di non mettere la
I told you to
frutta
not put fruit
nella zuppa. In
in
realtà
the
c'è
soup.
una zuppa
Actually,
che serve moltissimo
there is
come
a
depuratore
soup
per
that
l'intestino
acts
che si può
a
fare
lot like
ogni
for a
tanto
depuration of
e
the
costituita da
intestine, and is made out
mezzo
of
chilo di
half a kilo
carote
of
e
carrots,
una mela
an apple,
biologica perché deve essere
biological apple because
intera,
it needs to
tagliata
be
in
put whole,
quattro,
like just cut in half,
bolliti da un'ora e
boiled
mezza a
for 1 hour
due,
and a
con un
half or
pizzico
2
di
hours with
sale
a
che va aggiunto
pinch of
alla
salt that
fine.
is added at the
In
end.
una cottura così lunga
And with such a long
l'idratato si è
cooking,
ridotto, quindi
the
diventa una
water
cosa
has been
abbastanza
reduced, so it
densa
becomes quite
e
dense.
questo è un
And
grande
this is a
supporto
great
per i
support
batteri
for
buoni,
healthy
per
bacteria
l'intestino e
and for the
anche
intestine, and also
favorisce per la
it
quantità di
favors,
fibre l'eliminazione di
thanks
scorie
to
di
the
vecchio
quantity
dado.
of fibers, the elimination of all the
Avete scritto 1 litro d'acqua, mezzo chilo di carote, una mela.
waste. So alpha
Cotto per
kilo
un'ora e
of
mezza a due.
carrots, 1 apple,
Sì, ma non tutti i giorni però.
not every day
Non
though,
tutti i giorni, cioè una volta ogni tanto.
once in a while.
Poi io di solito
Then
consiglio se è
usually I
inverno
advise that
è
if it's
calda,
the
se è
winter, then it should be
estate
warmer. If
non
it's
dobbiamo
summer,
aumentare la
then we shouldn't
temperatura
increase
corporea
the
d'estate,
body temperature.
dobbiamo
Then we
abbassarla,
should
quindi
make it lower.
temperatura
So
ambiente.
uh,
Quindi, altre 2 regolette. Dite adesso ci abbiamo già una colazione, un pranzo, una cena, niente spuntini, ancora altre
okay, we
regole.
have breakfast, lunch,
Questo
dinner, rules
dicevano
about
i
them, no
medici della
snacks,
scuola medica
and so now more
salernitana, perché
rules.
noi spesso prendiamo le saggezze
we
dell'Oriente.
usually take the wisdom from the East, but we also had
Nella nostra cultura medica e dicevano postprandium
some wisdom in our
cioè dopo
medical
pranzo stare
culture. So
fermo,
postprandium stabis, that after lunch
dopo
you
cena
stay
vai a fare una
sitting,
passeggiatina.
and after dinner
E
you
questo
walk.
è molto sano.
And this is very
Non si
healthy.
dice di andare a
It is not
camminare
said to
un'ora dopo
walk
cena,
for 1 hour
È
after
una
dinner. It's like a
passeggiatina
little
sui
walk.
1000
You used to
passi,
say, they used to say
una
1,000
passeggiatina,
steps, something like that.
ritmo rilassato,
Relaxed rhythm.
perché alzarsi da
Because
tavola e
to
come
get
spesso
up
ci capita, soprattutto se
from
già
the
le
table,
9, 9 e
and
mezza
how
o
it
più,
often
ti
happens
siedi,
when it's like
resti sullo sdraio, ma
eight
non ci
and a
riesci,
half or 9,
quella è la morte
then
della
we sit
digestione, lo
and we
spegnimento.
eat, and then we
È
just
lo
stay there,
spegnimento
we
della
kind of fall
digestione.
asleep, and that
Quindi
is the digestion that just switches off
10
completely.
minuti.
So just to walk
Io
like
credo
10
che
minutes.
quelli che dicono
I believe that
che
those that
avere degli
say
animali
that to have
domestici,
some
il
pets,
cane,
like a
allunga la
dog,
vita,
makes
perché se hai
life
un cane sei
longer,
costretto a
because if you have a
uscire
dog, then
tutte le
you're forced
sere,
to go
se
out
non vuoi
every
ti faccia
evening if
la
you don't
pipì
want
in
him to
casa.
pee in your house.
E lì non
And
c'è
there is
tempo
no
bello,
time, there is
brutto, per lui lo
good or
fai.
bad,
E
whether there
dov'è il
is good or bad, and you
paradosso?
just
Per
do
il
it.
nostro
And
amico quattro
okay, the
zampe lo
paradox is
facciamo,
that we
per
do
lui
it for
stessi
our
magari
pet,
no.
but for ourselves we
Quindi
don't.
questo è il momento in
And
cui
so this is the
prendere questa
moment
abitudine.
where
Perché?
we
Perché
should take
adesso
this
non
habit,
pesa
because now
uscire
it's
anche
not
dopo
a
cena.
burden to
Ci
go out at dinner.
fugge,
There
non
is
ti devi
still
vestire più di
there's
tanto.
still light. You
Sapete che se
you
facciamo una
shouldn't
cosa per un
dress too heavily.
mese,
And you know that if we do something for a
diventa
month,
già
then it really
un'abitudine, il
becomes a
nostro
habit.
cervello
Our
vive di
brain
abitudini e
lives
dopo
out of
diventa
habits,
molto più
and then it
facile. Quindi
becomes
pian
much
piano
easier.
cambierà
So
la
bit by
stagione,
bit, then the
metteremo una
season
giacca in
changes. We
più,
put on
magari
another
cambineremo il
jacket, or
giro, se
maybe
potete
we will
uscite
walk
insieme a
another
qualcuno,
way if
perché
you can
diventa
or
anche un
want.
momento
Also
di,
go out with
come
someone
dire,
else, because also a moment
di relazione, insomma, di
of
socializzazione.
socializing,
Evitate,
and
per
to
piacere, di
avoid, please,
uscire
to get out
camminando
walking
con gli occhi
with
su
the
il
eyes on a
dispositivo,
device,
perché non fa bene.
because
Potete
that
anche
it's
metterlo
not
per 10
health. You
minuti
can just switch it off
in
for 10
realtà
minutes or put it on
non
airplane
succede
mode and
niente,
nothing happens.
però
But
cercate di prendere questa
try to
abitudine.
take this habit.
Anche dopo pranzo,
Also after
soprattutto per
lunch,
chi è in ufficio,
especially
mangia in
for those that are in
fretta,
the office and
sarebbe
eat
bene
in a
fare quei
hurry, it would be
passetti,
better
però magari
to
non si può.
walk a
C'è
little
una
bit, but maybe
cosa
it's
che
not
serve
possible. And
soprattutto
then
ad
there is
abbassare la
something that
glicemia, o magari nelle sere,
is useful,
nelle
especially to
serate più
make
tempestose in cui non potete andare a
glycemia
uscire,
lower,
ed
especially
è
in the
stando
evenings
in
of
piedi,
storm,
magari
where you
appoggiati a
can
un
just go
mobile,
out
alzarvi
and
sulle
to
punte
just
dei piedi
stand
o
and
a
then
piedi pari oppure alternate
lift
per
the heels
5-8
for
minuti.
like 5 or 8
Nei
minutes.
muscoli dei polpacci
And the muscles
ci sono
of the
dei
calves,
recettori che
in the muscles of the
comunicano
calves there are
che
some
ok, c'è
receptors that communicate
attività,
that there is activity.
quindi
So
aumentiamo il
we
metabolismo, evita che ci sia
activate,
quella
increase the
stagnazione che è
metabolism, and
tipica
it
di quella
avoids that
fase della
stagnation that is
giornata.
typical of that phase of the day.
Perché vanno bene i carboidrati a
Why
cena?
is it
Perché io
good
so
to
che
eat
dentro di voi ancora
carbohydrates at
non
dinner?
siete
Because I
convinti,
think
perché
that
avete
inside of you
sentito
you're still
dire
not convinced, because you
dall'istruttore
have
della
heard from
palestra,
the gym
da
instructor, from
tutti, che
everyone,
non si
that you
toccano i
shouldn't
carboidrati a
touch
cena.
carbohydrates
Alzi
at
la
dinner.
mano chi non ha
Lifts the
pensato
hand
questa
who
cosa.
didn't
Dai,
think about
alzatele,
this thing.
nessuno.
No one.
Allora, innanzitutto per
So first of
carboidrati
all,
si
by
intendono
carbohydrates we
cereali,
mean
possibilmente
cereals,
in
and
chicco
possibly
o integrali.
whole
Quindi
or in a
la
grain.
pasta, ok,
So
integrale,
pasta is
se non
better
avete
if it's
problemi di
whole,
disbiosi, perché
if you don't have
appunto entriamo già in
diabetes
un campo,
problems,
diciamo,
because
di nicchia.
okay, we enter a
I
niche problem.
carboidrati
Carbohydrates
facilitano la produzione e poi il passaggio in circolo
facilitate the production
dal
and the
cervello del
circulation
triptofano.
of
Il
tryptophanus,
triptofano è il precursore della
which is
serotonina.
the
In
precursor of
realtà molta
serotonin.
di questa conversione
Actually,
avviene
a
già
lot of this
nell'intestino.
conversion
Non vi sto
already
a
happens
dare
in the
le
intestine, but I
sottigliezze
will not give you the
percentuali.
subtle
La serotonina è il precursore della
percentages of things.
melatonina. Se non c'è serotonina,
Serotonin is the
melatonina non
precursor
tanta.
of melatonin, so if we don't have serotonin, then
Stabilizzano
we
la
won't have a
glicemia
lot of
perché hanno una
melatonin.
quota di fibre,
They
perché il
make
passaggio in
glycemia
circolo
stable,
nella digestione non è così rapida, il passaggio in circolo non
because
è così rapido,
the
ma in realtà
circulation is
basta
not so
mangiarli
rapid,
associati alla
but
verdura e a dei
actually
grassi sani
it's
e
just
si
enough to
ottiene lo
eat them
stesso
with vegetables, with
risultato.
fats, and you get the
Le
same
verdure
result.
cotte vi ho già detto perché
Cooked
sono più facili
vegetables,
da
because they're
digerire.
easier to
Che
digest, as
cosa
already said.
non bisogna
What
mangiare la
shouldn't
sera?
we eat
Gli
at dinner?
zuccheri semplici,
Simple sugars,
le farine raffinate
refined
e
flowers. And what is that substance that is liquid that gives glucose? Alcohol, exactly.
No,
No.
sempre riporto quello che mi dicono. Dottoressa, un
Doctor, one glass of wine at dinner, I need to relax myself after a really hard day. I deserved it. And I could say, yes, maybe you deserved it, but I don't know if it's really good for you. I don't know if you're doing good to yourself. And so also alcohol is not by absolute to demonize, but the quantity of wine that is recommended by the OMS talk about 2 glasses of wine per week and half for women. It's not sexism, it's that the liver of a woman has fewer enzymes and metabolizes worse alcohol. And more than that, there is a further distinction in rapid and slow acelerators. This is genetic dot. There are those that have a lot of quick enzymes to destroy alcohol. That anyway, it's toxic to the brain, and others that have a lot of slowness. So to know whether you're fast or slow, usually you find that out in when you have an anesthesia, depending on the amount of the amount that you receive. So we're not all the same. Then also depends whether we have a healthy liver or not, but wine at evening is sugar and one of the quickest one to circulate. An alcoholic beer is fine. It's fine unless we have problems of fermentation, because anyway it's a fermented drink. So if we already have a tendency to have gas metabolism, I advise and also actually drink an alcoholic beer as a digestive, because it doesn't have sugars and other things inside. It's a natural production because of fermentation, but it's blocked before it develops alcohol. So it's like 0.1%. So
non siamo tutti uguali.
We are not all the same.
Prego, là. E infatti è quello che ho detto, a meno che non si abbiano problemi.
Unless, this is just what I said, unless you have problems of fermentation in the intestine. We have yeast in the intestine, also candida. So if we have a normal intestine, if we don't have problems of fermentation, then I want to say every day drink 2 beers, but can also drink.
Se uno ha già problemi di questo tipo è meglio evitarli.
But if we have problems of this kind, then it's better to avoid it because it increases the quantity of yeast in the intestine. We're not all the same, so there are those that about the biological clocks, the ones that are more on the sympathetic system are more activated during the day, and the vagal ones are more awake during the evening.
Però alla sera si spengono rapidamente.
So like people that wake up early in the morning and they're very active, but then they switch off when evening comes, and they're both right. It was calculated, it was studied.
Forzare, è stato osservato, forzare le persone
to force people to work, like maybe a person that is more sympathetic to work in the early hours in the morning, and a vagal one to do night shifts brings to a productive damage. And we have seen actually that the word is balanced on the vagal ones. So
perché se l'orario di lavoro inizia alle 8, tu alle 8 devi.
If the working time starts at 8, then you should just be there. You try to do that, but actually your best would happen from 5 to 8 in the evening. And they calculated, I don't know whether it's true or not, but this is what sociologists do, that they miss a good part of the creativity, of the good ideas that these people could have, because they're forced to work in a moment where actually it's not fine for them. And I can tell you it's really like that. I would have never had a degree if I had to study only in the morning. And on the other hand, just like athletes, there are those that perform well in races, maybe in the morning, or competitions, maybe there are more towards the evening, or and so on. And so we can train ourselves, but we have our own rhythm. How can we preserve or find back our harmony? I give you some hints. This is some advice, and an advice inside of the advice. Okay, now we will go through them, but then choose one or two what you find the easiest, because to force ourselves to do something that comes difficult to us, then we will drop it much more often. So find the ones, choose the ones that are more for you, but put them into practice with constancy for a certain amount of time. First thing is to do one thing at a time. This so-called multitasking, of which especially women praise themselves, actually it's an enormous overcharge, which partly is physiological. The brain of a woman, the body of a woman, from the evolutionary point of view, the woman had to look at the baby, take care of the baby, check that you wouldn't get hurt, maybe take care of the baby, then look around the cave or the house for dangers. So there was a continuous, an attention that was continuously between the close and the mid-range. The same biology of a woman, there was the same fact also of giving life to babies. So at the same time, so I developed a mind that has many connections between the left and right hemisphere. Man, on the other hand, had some tasks that were much more precise, and it was a search of something useful for survival and to have to win on the opponents, which could have been like sources of life also if they won over them, or source of death if the opponent won. So they had to focus a lot on one specific thing. So it's true that in women there is a greater inclination to think about many things at the same time, but my advice is to calm this thing down, not to emphasize it, because sometimes when something seems good, what do we do with it? We do it more and more. Now, instead of doing 3 things at a time, I drive, I think that I should do the grocery and also think about the things that I should do tomorrow, and meanwhile maybe I answer some phone calls and so on. Why not? Okay, I'm driving, perfect. Now from here to there, I'm just driving. I do one thing. I go to buy the groceries, I prepared a list, and I buy the groceries. It seems easy, but it's not. You would have a lot of interferences on this thing, but it's useful to slow down. To man, it comes a bit simpler, and this is not a joke. To do one thing at a time for the structure that men have is simpler, and it's something that we should learn, I believe.
L'organismo ama la regolarità, quindi
our organism loves regularity. So to regularize the times of the day is useful because all our clocks, for example the one of digestion, already sets itself to digest more or less around the time where we should digest. In this way, the meal will not come in an organ to an organ that is not prepared. You know that in digestion there is the cephalic phase, that is when we think about the food that we will eat. It's supported, for example, from the smell of the food, from the time, definitely from the necessity, the energetical necessity, but without the cephalic phase that could be supported by preparing the food or by uh, taking part into the preparation of the food, the digestion starts a little bit later and better. You know, when you have like the water in your mouth and you think about something and you're water in your mouth, that is the function of the cephalic phase of digestion. So we're very organic, very mechanic. So let's use this mechanic to use what are really important processes for our health. Another thing is to make the bedtime more regular. Morning and evening are two good moments, because when in the middle of that, whatever happens, it not always depends on us. But let's try at least to have two good moments to stabilize ourselves. Chrononutrition. We talked about that before, what to eat at what time, and especially dinner should be monotonous. So, more or less made out of the same things. It's soup and soup. Rice and vegetables is rice and vegetables. Simple, with few ingredients, and more or less standardized. Do you like it? No.
Così è.
It's just like that. There is also a mantra.
Gli ancoraggi alla luce. Questi sono molto semplici da fare, se uno vuole. L'ancoraggio alla luce è
anchoring to light in the morning. This is connecting to what happens outside, simple in the morning. To try to, I hope that you have like a window, a door, something that looks east, to expose oneself to the light of the sun. It's not that it has to be like very early, like at dawn. It just needs to be the light of the morning, the natural light. Also put some effort in winter, not behind the mirror, the glass that filters the better part. The sun, you can open a window, you just put on a big scarf and you stay like 5 minutes, not 1 hour. If you want to stay 1 hour, you can do it. But in the morning, the light of the sun at east, 5 minutes, breathe, and also here, doing what? Nothing else.
un po' di musica,
you can maybe listen to some music if you like, if it's relaxing, but not like hard rock.
Alla sera,
in the evening, anchoring to light is to allow the darkness to prevail on light also in the domestic environment. So I don't know if you still have neons, just take them away. Neons are really like a terrible light. If you have some good lights with natural white light, then it's fine. But in the evening, just turn down the lights, and now you can already. And to decrease the exposition to blue lights, and so various devices. And I can understand that it's also a moment where one also dedicates himself or herself to some friendly relationships. All the devices have the blue filter that is already incorporated, so you can set it from time of sunset to the time of dawn. So you have to change it during the year, but I always keep it on the winter setting. So at 6 you see that it gets darker and gets more yellow. But if you have to work at the computer has it also on the computer. You can put it, or otherwise you also have some glasses. At least filter the blue light, but try to not go on until the bedtime looking at devices, looking at screens. TV,
Se è qualcosa, io qui faccio una differenza di qualità.
here I make a difference of quality. If it's something that it's worth watching, then sometimes it's fine, but if you just have to watch some TV to just get some light rays for nothing, and then better. No, one thing that is really harmful is TV in the bedroom. Just like all those red LEDs of the various chargers, and
questi vanno tutti.
these should all be eliminated. But once that I'm falling, I don't see anything at all. But our eyes record them. Because after 20 minutes in the darkness, our eyes adjusted to that, and even through the closed eyes, that can be revelated.
Chi si sveglia con una sveglia che fa dring.
So also those that, okay, talking about still technology, about the alarm in the morning, you shouldn't have like a ringing alarm that it's very, very high.
Esistono delle cosiddette sveglie crepuscolari
There are the so-called
che mezz'ora prima dell'orario impostato cominciano ad illuminare.
twilight alarms that 2 hours after, 2 hours before the set time, they start to light up, and they simulate the light of the dawn.
Però c'è un risveglio graduale.
And there is a gradual awakening. When do we wake up? When our phase of sleep, you know that then in sleep we have some phases that are going up or down. So when we are really going to the phase that is going up, so to wake, then we just need a very delicate sound, a minimum ray of light to wake ourselves up. And that is a physiological alarm. On the other hand, the typical alarm that rings, even if it's not like a dream, but it's some music in the moment where, for example, you were sleeping, and it takes you some seconds to realize, actually, I wasn't there, and that is a bad awakening. When there will be a day where our cortisol, if we don't do something, it will remain high. How to find balance again during the day, to create a pause, a void between one activity and the other. So first of all, here we need to have learned to do one thing at a time, because otherwise there will never be any void, there will always be something. And so a small void could be the time of 5 breaths, for example. It could be I close my eyes and I think about the face of someone, about the face of my cat, or I don't know, something that we like. We just need a little bit. And the more you do it, the more quickly you will also get the decrease in the brainwaves, that will slow down. So to create some break, some pause between one activity and the other.
Come disattivare gli allarmi.
How to deactivate alarms. And here we're already getting into the more difficult task. During the day, okay, we have said first there is the alarm, high cortisol, then if everything is well, then we get out of our home, more or less recharge according to how many kids you have to take care of. Did you remember this? You remember that? And if everything goes well, you step on your car or on a bus or something, and that starts the real fight, because like to drive for 3 kilometers in a city, it could also be quite challenging. Also in this I'm lucky, so I chose areas to live that are in the mountains, and so no one is disturbing me there. There are a lot of curves, but that's not a problem. Better to have curves rather than 10 semaphores, traffic lights. And unfortunately, when we get to work, we would hope that everything runs smoothly physiologically, but it's not always like that. So the first thing that they tell you as you're doing something else, but you know that the day will be a whole set of alarms, one after the other, and they are one summed to the previous one. So how can we manage after a series of small stimulations or after a very challenging task, like a meeting, an important meeting, or like a difficult patient after a conflict? Unfortunately, there are also this, but especially before eating and before sleeping, and if possible, when coming back from work, how can we deactivate the alarms? Let's start with the most difficult ones after a conflict.
Non so se avete mai sentito parlare della
I don't know if you've ever heard of the meditation of the half smile. Here, a short premise, because I don't want you to be late at dinner. There is a neurological correlation between the muscles, especially some muscles, and the vagal and sympathetic systems. In particular, some muscles of the face, the trigeminus, the facial muscles, are directly connected. So not only the sympathetic, the vagal, they branch out these nerves, but to these muscles, but also these muscles send some information to these nerves. Why does a person that is angry has a closed face? Not because it was talked to us, but because it just comes out like that. Why? Actually, when they give you some good news, your face gets open, or why do we laugh for a good thing? Why do we cry for something that makes us sad? These are physical reactions. The same is true also for a lot for the muscles of the neck. Know how many inflamed cervicals are answers of for a sympathetic system that is too activated, and then it also takes the vagal that runs here, as I said. And so cervical tensions there, anxiety, go hand by hand. We can use the reverse path, so to change our posture, the expression of our face, but also the posture, to send signals of tranquility to our brain. That, quite in a stupid way, even if we think that is the most intelligent organ of our body, then we just believe it. So try to be angry while you smile. You can't do it. And actually, what do kids do when they want to show you that they're angry? They really put on their face, their long face. And it works like that. So we use this type of exercise to send signals of calmness to our body.
Io non so se questa meditazione del mezzo sorriso ve la dico come me l'hanno insegnata, se sia stata,
I tell you how I think that it was inspired by some presentations of Buddha. Buddha didn't have like a full smile, it was like a half smile, but enough to give some positive sign to the brain. Definitely we need to have tried it before, because you can't do it the first time after a fight. It works more or less like this. I would like you to make you do it, but I would just describe it. So you close your eyes, you take 3 breaths, then you start to think about the dearest person that you have in the world, and automatically your face will be relaxed. So because you feel the love that you have for this other creature, doesn't matter how many paws or tails or whatever.
Io avevo un collega
I had a colleague
che quando era ingrugnato al
when
lavoro
I was angry at work, I would ask him, but how is your dog? And then all the anger would just go away. He would start telling stories about it, and he had already switched off the program of anger. But we're all like that. Maybe to someone else you ask about the children, to someone else about something else, and so then so your face stretches out in a more relaxed expression, and then still with closed eyes think about other people that you love, and voluntarily act your face into a half smile. So with a quite stretched face, open shoulders, because also shoulders respond to signs of closure and openness. and it will not be difficult for you. And then you make this the surrounding people. You add more surrounding people, like also going to more neutral people, but you maintain this serene expression. Then on and on, you make come closer also people that maybe annoy you a little bit, just a little bit, not too much. Then at this point it should be quite automatic, so that you have a bit of a harder time to maintain the expression. And the exercise could also just end here if it's just about maintaining calmness. But if you really want to resolve with this person with which you have had a conflict, maybe this you do it later at home, you do that, and then you think also of getting closer, making come closer also to this person, maintaining the expression of the half smile. Why half smile? Because a whole one will be too much, will be false, will be forced. While actually, half a smile is simply the muscular activation that already achieves the goal without. And in the meanwhile, try to keep, as Lama Michel says, the neutral position of the mouth, the head is the tongue touching the palate behind the teeth, then shoulders are in a relaxed way. Don't close your hands in a fist, and to maintain a state of relaxation. If you have a strong aversion, then do this thing more times. But the thing here was about after a conflict to regain calmness. So just think about the people that are deep for you, people that allow you to feel that you're serene and smiling. So you should train first, but then you just really need like 2 or 3 minutes. To me, it has happened to close myself in a bathroom to be able to do it, because I need to
spenderò pochissime parole perché
and here I will spend just a few words, and you have already done it all these mornings. The breath, our breath is our strongest tool for balancing the alternation between sympathetic and vagal. And especially when we have our chest full and in the out breath there is a regulation of the vagal. And this we can use it in any moment. So either it becomes one of the 2 moments in the morning and evening for 10 minutes. Sometimes we really need like 2 or 3 minutes of breathing that is well made if you trained it beforehand. But if you didn't, then you cannot expect you to rebalance in 2 or 3 minutes, to rebalance your vagal. And this is what I wanted to make you try this evening. That is the breathing in crossed cycles. I say that in the neck there are the nerves of the vagal. So as we work on the muscles of the neck and of the head together with the breathing, we are able to rebalance them. Rebalance it. Are you ready?
Fate 2 o 3 respiri.
Take 2 or 3 breaths without forcing anything. Don't check whether it's abdominal or thoracic, just a few breaths, like calmly, simply focusing on your own breath.
Adesso io vi guiderò a fare alcune.
Now I will guide you to do some in-breaths and out-breaths that are related to movements of the head, which will go backwards or in front. I will try to find a rhythm that is good for everyone. So now, as we breathe in, you bring the head backwards. Shouldn't hurt yourself.
Poi espirando ritornate
dritti. Out, we go back straight.
Di nuovo in avanti.
Breathe in again, we go in front.
Espirando tornate
and as
su.
we breathe out, we go up.
Adesso a testa ferma.
And now with the head still, you breathe in.
Adesso espirando.
And now as you breathe out, you go backwards.
Poi tornate avanti.
Then you go back in front as you breathe in.
Espirando in avanti.
As you breathe in, you go in front, and as you breathe out, you go back to the starting point.
Facciamo un recap.
Now we do a
Praticamente
recap. Basically, it's 2 complete breathing cycles,
prima
going first back and then front, but in the middle you've seen that you keep the head still in order to invert the in-breath and the out-breath cycle. And this is the trick a bit. So you can, if you want to do it together by yourself, with your hand, you can raise the hand when you breathe in and take it down when you breathe out, to remember where you are, because it doesn't seem, but after the third or fourth breath, when the cortisol decreases, then you lose
facciamo un altro paio di volte.
lose the count. So we do it just a couple of times more. If you want, you can do it also later this evening.
Consolidare l'apprendimento, se vi va ovviamente. Allora, 2 o 3 respiri, un paio di respiri
So 2 or 3 breaths.
tranquilli. Vuotate il torace e adesso
Empty your chest.
inspirate
And now breathe in as you go backwards.
espirate tornando dritti,
And breathe out, going back straight.
inspirate andando giù verso il
Breathe
petto,
in, going down towards the chest.
espirate tornando
And
su.
breathe out, going back up.
Stando fermi,
Standing
inspirate.
still. Now you breathe in.
Adesso espirate andando
Now you
indietro,
breathe out, going backwards.
inspirate tornando avanti,
Breathe in, going in front.
espirate andando giù,
Breathe in, going down.
espirate tornando su.
And breathe out, going back up.
3-4 cicli di questo
3 or
tipo
4 cycles like this.
agiscono qui dietro
Act
come un...
here,
Vi
behind
aggiungo
here.
un'altra cosina, chi ha
And I add a little something, who has 5 minutes of time when you get home from work and you feel like over a
se avete un bel letto
bit
matrimoniale,
too...
vi mettete con la testa al posto dei piedi,
You can put a pillow, you
dai piedi del letto,
can put your head that is slightly outside of the bed, and you open your arms like this, with the palms looking up and the feet
e la testa
to the open to the outside, the head as back as possible,
e state lì
and you just stay there enjoying the moment. This is also one of those moments where you should just do one thing, possibly don't
e
think
questa
about anything,
cosa è molto
and this is very useful.
ce ne sono tanti altri,
There are many
me ne vengono
others.
almeno 5, però io mi
At
fermerei
least 5 come to my mind, but I will stop here, and I hope that
qualcosa di quello che avete
something
ascoltato
of what
possa
you have
essere
listened to
utile
could be
a farvi
useful
sentire
to
bene,
make you
perché
feel
lo
well,
scopo della nostra
because the
vita,
purpose of our
che
life
anche è
and
una
also
definizione di
this
salute, non
definition
è
of
la
health
mancanza di
is not
malattia,
the lack
ma
of
è uno
sickness,
stato di
but
completo
it's a
benessere
state
fisico,
of
psichico
complete
e
well-being
mentale
that is
e
physical,
anche
mental,
sociale.
and also
Quindi più
social.
persone stanno bene nel
And
mio
so the more
entourage
people
e
are
sono
doing well in my
felici e sono
entourage and are
realizzate,
happy and are realized,
meglio staremo anche noi. Quindi
the
non solo
better we
farlo
will
per
also feel.
noi,
So to not just do it for
ma
ourselves, but
cercare di
to try
come dire, allargare il
to
cerchio, come i
make
cerchi
the
nell'acqua.
circle larger,
Allargare il
like the
cerchio
circles
perché
in the
sempre
water,
più persone
because then,
possano
so
essere
that more and more people
in
can
buona salute,
be in good
e
health,
questo è un atto
and
di
this is
egoismo,
an
cioè lo
act
facciamo per noi.
of real selfishness. So fundamentally we're doing it for ourselves, but it's a healthy
Più che
selfishness.
dire, fare,
So more
e
than
sempre
saying,
diffondere
doing,
un pochino quello
and
che vi
to
fa stare
maybe
bene.
also spread what makes you feel good.
Un saluto. Io non so se qualcuno
I don't know if
vuole
someone
chiedere qualcosa,
wants to ask something.
se volete, insomma, se avete il tempo.
Che hai passato molto rapidamente, un orologio, però l'hai passato tipo 3 secondi.
Quell'orologio sì, ma perché non volevo focalizzarmi tanto su tutto.
Yes, I didn't want to focus on the
è,
fundamental
abbiamo
concept
degli
is that we have some
orologi e non
clocks,
stasiamoli.
but let's not
Vado a
make
cercare,
them imbalanced.
probabilmente. Sì, adesso ci arrivo, penso che sia abbastanza... È questo. Vero? No, no, tutte e due. La frutta è un carboidrato.
Fruit is a carbohydrate.
Nella frutta ci sono anche le fibre.
In fruit you also have fibers.
La frutta va molto bene
Fruit
cruda la
is
mattina
very
e cotta
fine
la sera.
raw in the morning
E
and
dopo
cooked
le
in the evening,
proteine
and
e a pranzo non mangiare
after
frutta.
proteins, so at lunch you shouldn't eat fruit.
Allora, il veganesimo...
So
sì, giusto. Allora, mi è stato chiesto
it has been asked
se
to
a
me
colazione
whether in the
si
morning
mangia la frutta o le proteine.
we
No, si
should
mangiano
eat fruit or
entrambi.
proteins. No,
E
we
la
should
frutta
eat both,
contiene
and fruit contains
carboidrati e anche
carbohydrates
fibre,
and
quindi
also
c'è già una
fibers.
certa quota
So
di
there is
fibre.
also
La
certain
domanda
amount of
successiva
fibers.
era:
The next
una
question
persona che segue una dieta
was
vegana
like a person that follows
come
a
può
vegan diet, how
avere le
can
proteine
she
necessarie
have
nel pranzo se
the
non
necessary
associa
proteins at lunch
altro,
if she doesn't
sostanzialmente cereali.
associate also other things, and
Qui
mostly
entriamo in un
cereals.
capitolo
Here we
che
get
è la
into
dieta
a
vegana
chapter
che
that is
non
the
è naturale per
vegan
l'uomo.
diet
Io
that
oggi ho
is not
parlato di
natural for man.
fisiologia standard.
For today I talked
La
about
dieta
standard
vegana è un
physiology.
pochino una
Vegan diet is a
forzatura che
bit
io
of a
posso anche
forcing that I can
condividere
also
per
share
vari
for
motivi,
various reasons,
ma che a livello di
but that
fisiologia non
on a
è esattamente
physiological
cioè,
level
la cosa
is
più sana,
not necessarily the
soprattutto
most
quando
healthy
si
thing,
va
especially
nella
when
seconda metà della vita.
we go in the second
Se invece
phase of
parliamo
life,
di
second middle of our
vegetariano,
life. But
allora
if we
lì
talk about
abbiamo comunque altre
vegetarianism, then
proteine
yes, we have other
che
proteins
derivano, non so, dalle
that come
uova.
from eggs, for
Comunque
instance.
per i vegani ci sono le
For
proteine
vegans,
dei
there are the
legumi,
proteins
ma
of the
le proteine dei legumi, non
like
il
beans
legume
and so on.
intero, perché
But the proteins, not
per
the
avere la
whole
giusta quantità di proteina bisogna
bean or whatever,
assumere
because in order to have the
insieme,
right
perché
amount of
sono
proteins,
insieme,
we need to
una
also
quantità di fibre e carboidrati
get
che è
a quantity of
veramente
fibers
elevata.
and quantity
Quando poi,
of
secondo
carbohydrates that
la
is very high.
concezione
And
del
according
se
to the
metti
old
insieme
conception, to the old idea that if you
legume
put
e un
together
cereale
some
avrai
beans
tutti gli
and some cereals, you
amminoacidi,
would have all
mi
the amino
dispiace, ma
acids.
sappiamo che
I'm
non è
sorry,
così,
but
ne
we know
mancano
that it's not
comunque
like that.
9
Anyway, we miss
che
9 of them that
l'organismo
the
può
organism can
creare
create
indipendentemente dal fatto che
independently
mangiamo insieme
from the fact
proteina
that
e legume.
we eat together proteins
Li riesce a creare, ma
and
solo nelle
beans. It's able
prime
to
età
create
della
them, but
vita.
only in the first
Quindi,
half
mentre
of
nel
life.
bambino c'è un
So
metabolismo molto
while
efficiente,
in the
molto
kid there is a
performante,
mechanism that is very
che riesce
efficient, very
anche a
performing,
sintetizzare
that is also able to
amminoacidi non
synthesize
presenti nel
amino
cibo,
acids that are
i
not
9
present
essenziali,
in food,
e
the nine
produrseli,
essentials
man
ones,
mano che si
and to produce
procede
them.
nella vita,
As we
questa
go on in life,
capacità
this
purtroppo viene
capacity
meno.
unfortunately
Quindi a
comes
maggior
less.
ragione andando
And so
avanti
the more we go
bisogna
on
stare
with
attenti,
life, the
uno, a
more we have to
non
be
scendere
careful.
sotto un
One,
certo
to
livello di
not
assunzione
go
delle proteine,
below a
anche
certain level
vegetali,
of
però
assumption of proteins, also
bisogna
vegetables ones,
assumerle, perché il rischio è la sarcopenia.
because the
La
risk is
sarcopenia, l'accorciamento
sarcopenia,
dei telomeri, è
the
un meccanismo cellulare, sono tra le
it's a cellular
cause
mechanism
più
which is
studiate in
one of the
questo
most
momento come
studied
fattore
causes
di
as a
aging,
factor
quindi
of
in
aging.
fattore di invecchiamento, che si cerca
And we
si cerca
try
di invertire la
to
tendenza
revert
proprio
the
perché
tendency,
è tra le forme di invecchiamento
just because
proprio
indeed it's
biologico,
really one of the causes of the
quindi
biological
tofu,
aging.
poi
And so
esistono le proteine
tofu, then
estratte
there are
anche da
the
altri
proteins also
cereali per
extracted
non
by
fare
other
un
cereals to
eccesso di
not
proteine della soia, perché anche
excess,
loro
take an
hanno
excess of soy
qualche in
proteins.
realtà tutti gli
Actually,
alimenti mangiati tutti i giorni non fanno
all
bene,
types of food, if we eat
quindi
them every
bisognerebbe
day,
comunque
it's not fine. We should
diversificare.
have
Adesso
some
ci sono
diversity.
prodotti,
Now there are some
proteine
products
isolate
with isolated proteins
del lupino, dei
of
piselli, quindi di altri cereali
peas,
per
of other
diversificare. La
things
forma è
to
sempre un po' più come quella
diversify.
del
The
però almeno
form is more or less
potendo
always that
aggiungere
of tofu.
tofu e
So
ortaggi,
at lunch to
anche
eat
patate, anche
like
un po' di
tofu
riso,
and some
però
vegetables, also potatoes and some rice.
questa cosa del
But this
piatto
thing of
vegano
the vegan dish
sarà
with
completo se ha
that is
la
complete if
proteina,
it has the protein
scusate,
and
il cereale, il
cereal,
legume
the
e la
legume
verdura,
and
purtroppo
vegetable. Unfortunately,
non regge più,
it doesn't
chimicamente non regge
hold
più.
biochemically.
Poi ognuno fa
Then
le sue
everyone
scelte.
can make his own
E
choices.
un'altra cosa che penso è
Another
che
thing that I think is that
i nostri valori
our
interni
inner values
anche attraverso
also
l'asse del
through
cortisolo, ma anche dell'acetilcolina.
cortisol
Io vi ho
axis, and
citato
today
più
I quoted
famosi
also
perché
just the
non
most
leggo, non si
famous
può
ones,
andare
because
molto
in
oltre.
1 hour and a half we can't go much further
Variano a
than that.
seconda
They
delle emozioni che
vary
abbiamo.
based on
Ad
the emotions that
esempio,
we have.
questo ad esempio
For instance, this,
nella cucina
for example,
ayurvedica
the
è
Ayurvedic
molto ribadito. Non bisogna
way of cooking in
mangiare un
Ayurvedic
cibo che
diet
ci
is very
disgusta
much
o quando
talked
non ne
about. To
abbiamo
not eat
voglia.
something that is disgusting for
Quindi non
us or when
possiamo
we don't feel
mangiare
like
quello
it.
che
So
vogliamo quando vogliamo, ma
it's
sicuramente se
we can't eat what
è
we want whenever we want,
mezzogiorno,
but definitely
è
if
l'ora di
it's
pranzo, io non ho
noon,
fame
it's
e c'è una
lunch, and
cosa
I'm
che
not hungry
mi
and there is something that
disgusta,
is disgusting,
è meglio non
and then it's
mangiarlo.
better to not eat it.
Quindi una persona che ha
So a person that has a strong
una forte convinzione vegana, io lo sono stata
vegan
per 14
conviction, and
anni,
I've
quindi
been vegan
so
for
molto bene
14
di
years,
cosa
so I
parlo.
know very
Non
well what we
poter
are talking about.
pensare
To not
che ci sia stato
be
un
able to think that
atto
there has been a
violento,
violent act,
però io
but
forse tutti dobbiamo al
maybe
nostro
we
corpo, che è
should
lo strumento con cui noi attraversiamo
we
questa
owe to
vita,
our body, which is the tool through which we go
almeno
to life,
altrettanto rispetto
we should owe
come
at least as
agli
much respect
animali
as we
a
owe
cui abbiamo
to
risparmiato la
the
vita
animal to which
non
we spared our
consumando.
life by not
Un'altra cosa da
consuming
pensare è
its
che
meat.
secondo me la vera
Another thing that we
etica
should think is that the
del
real
cibo adesso
ethic
come
of food
adesso
as of now
è costituita più
is
da
made more
non sprecare nemmeno
by not
un
wasting, not
grammo
even
di
like a
quello
gram
del cibo che
of the
abbiamo in
food
casa,
that
che
we have home,
compriamo,
that we buy,
della fare acquisti etici,
of
quindi guardando da dove
of
viene,
buying ethically, so
perché
checking
chi
where it
si
comes from,
rivolge
because
verso
who goes
un'alimentazione
towards
vegetale
a vegetable alimentation,
chiedersi da dove viene quel vegetale,
vegetarianism,
perché
to ask oneself, where does
magari
that
voi non li
vegetable come from?
seguite, io
Maybe
vengo a sapere perché sono anche dei casi clinici,
you don't know
ci
about these
sono
things,
dei
but
latifordi
I
con
hear
delle
about some
coltivazioni intensive molto grandi, ma anche in Italia,
farmings that are also
parlando
very
di
big,
chissà
also
quale
in Italy. I'm not talking
paese in via
about
di sviluppo,
whatever country
che sfruttano
development,
esseri
that
umani come schiavi.
abuse of
Quest'estate
human
non so quante
beings,
persone
also of
sono morte
slaves. I
per
don't
il
know how
caldo,
many
non
people
le
died
sapremo
in this
neanche mai
summer.
tutte,
We will
o
also
per gli
never know
effetti
them
di
all, or
certi
for the effects of
pesticidi
some
usati senza protezione.
pesticides used without
Pronto soccorso
protection.
di Latina, quest'estate, mese di
The
luglio,
Latina hospital in the
gangrena
months
delle
of
gambe, non
July,
voglio
they had so many
inquinare il
cases.
pensiero con
I don't
queste
want to
cose, ma
pollute your thoughts
bisogna
with these
sempre
things, but
pensare che
we should always
al
think
giorno
that
d'oggi io credo che
as
non
of today
esista
there
una
is no
nostra
such thing
azione che non ha un
as an
impatto
action
sul
that
pianeta,
we do that doesn't have an impact on the
quindi
environment.
diventiamo
And
etici
so
nella
let's become
quantità, nella
ethical in the
qualità, nel
quantity, in
non
the quality,
sprecare,
in
nel
the not
fare
wasting,
ogni piccola
in
azione che
doing every
possiamo. Non
little
so,
action that we
posso
can.
scegliere
For
tra
instance,
un
I can choose
sacchetto di
between
plastica o
a
portare
bag
la
of
mia borsina
plastic
da
or to
casa.
bring my
Caspita, io non so
bag
quanto
from
tempo
home.
è che non prendo una di quelle
I
borsine,
don't
lo
know
so che sono
when was
biodegradabili,
it the last
ma
time that I
è
bought one
meglio
of
non
those
usarle, le
bags. I know
porto da
that
casa.
they are
E lo stesso vale per tanti
can be
contenitori.
degraded and
Cioè,
so on, but
io
it's
credo
better
che
to bring it
possiamo
from home.
contribuire in modo
And I think that we
etico
can contribute
in
in an
vari
ethical
modi.
way in many ways.
Comunque questo è il mio pensiero.
But anyway, this is my
Comunque se
thinking.
finché non si fa questo
Anyway,
passaggio
until
proprio
we
nel
don't
cuore, è
take
meglio
this
non
step really with the
mangiare
heart, it's better to
alimenti
not eat
animali.
animal
Però bisogna
types of
sostenere in
food,
qualche altro modo
but we
sapendo
need
che
to
ad esempio esistono integratori di cui
balance
quanto
with
essenziali.
some other ways.
Devo sapere, ci sono degli esami che si possono fare per sapere se ho un eccesso di stamina?
Sì, però questo è un capitolo veramente grande. La domanda era se ci sono esami che si
Question
possono fare
was whether
per
there
sapere
are
se si
some
ha un
exams
eccesso
that
di
we can
stamina.
do
Sì, ci
to check if there is an
sono di
excess of
vario genere,
histamine.
quindi non è una
Yes,
risposta
there are
comune,
some.
è un po'
This is
fuori
not a
dal
unique
tema di
answer, it's a
oggi.
bit outside of the theme of today.
Sì e no, nel senso perché solo albume? Perché se mangiare uova,
Whether
tante
we
uova è
should
sbagliato,
eat
no,
many
questa
eggs
è una
is wrong,
domanda, in particolare solo albume.
and particularly only the
Di ciò che
white
fa
part.
bene, del motivo per cui si dovrebbero mangiare. No, di ciò che fa bene, di ciò che fa bene. L'uovo ha un
Egg,
valore come tanti alimenti
as many
preso in
types of
toto. La
food,
natura non
it should be taken as a whole. Nature is not wrong in anything. It's true that nature didn't think about eggs as some food, but since the red part is the most noble one, because it contains acid fats, cholesterol, but also lecithin, which contains also the cholesterol of that egg, but also noble proteins of very high profile, iron, and also another series of things like acetylcholine and other things. Albumin is just one protein. It is among the allergens. Among the allergens of an egg is the most allergenic part. It's easier to have allergy to the white part rather to the yellow part. So why should we just eat one part? And I don't want to quote the Tetra Pak, the containers of only white parts of the egg, and that is ultra processed food that doesn't have excuses of any kind.
Allora si fa il pancake con l'uovo intero, tutto ciò che è impacchettato,
everything that is packed, sterilized, processed, mixed, colored, and so on, just let it be. These are real interferences for hormones.
Certo. Quindi chiudiamo qui. Grazie a voi.
Thank you.